The weekly supply convoy from Earth arrived at Centauri Station with its usual cargo of outdated equipment and apologetic explanations. Ambassador David Ross watched through the observation deck as human cargo ships struggled to dock properly, their primitive navigation systems causing minor collisions with the loading bays. Other diplomats in the viewing area shook their heads in mild disgust at humanity's continued incompetence. "Those humans never learn," muttered Ambassador Krelvak, his blue-scaled face showing clear irritation. The Altarian diplomat adjusted his crystalline robes and turned away from the embarrassing display. 3 years in the coalition, and they still can't dock without scraping the hull. David nodded with what appeared to be shameful agreement, though internally he smiled. The clumsy docking was perfectly executed theater. Every scrape and bump was calculated to maintain Earth's reputation as the coalition's most backward member. What the other species didn't see were the microscopic sensor arrays being planted during each accidental contact with the station's hull. The Coalition Council chambers buzzed with urgent conversation as reports flowed in from the outer rim. Territories. The hegemony had struck again, this time hitting 3 Altarian research outposts simultaneously. The attacks were swift and brutal, leaving no survivors and taking all valuable technology before vanishing back into the dark spaces between systems. "The pattern is clear," announced Admiral Zephyrus, his powerful voice echoing through the great hall. The Torvak warriors' red skins seemed to glow with barely contained anger. "These Kethvar raiders are not random pirates. They strike with precision, take what they want, and disappear before our fleets can respond." Counselor Merith of the HFY species nodded gravely, her large eyes reflecting the holographic displays showing destroyed colonies. "Our analysis suggests they have detailed knowledge of our defensive positions and response times. Someone is providing them with intelligence." David Ross remained silent during most of the discussion, occasionally taking notes on his primitive data pad. When called upon to speak, he expressed humanity's concern in simple terms. "Earth stands ready to help however we can. We could send medical supplies, maybe some patrol ships to help with evacuations." The offer was met with polite but dismissive thanks. Everyone knew human medical supplies were basic at best, and their patrol ships were barely capable of interstellar flight. Admiral Zephyrus didn't even look in David's direction when he outlined the Coalition's military response. After the session ended, David made his way through the station's corridors toward the human embassy section. The area was small and poorly located, reflecting humanity's low status in the galactic community. Other species' embassies occupied prime real estate with spectacular views of the nebula, while Earth's representatives worked from cramped quarters, near the waste processing levels. Inside his private office, David activated a communication array that looked like standard human technology, but was actually far more sophisticated than anything the Coalition possessed. The signal traveled through quantum-encrypted channels to reach its destination on the far side of Earth's moon. General Patricia Hayes appeared on the screen, her gray hair pulled back in a military style that suggested years of discipline. Behind her, the Luna Command Center hummed with activity as dozens of technicians monitored displays showing real-time intelligence from across the galaxy. "Report," she said simply. "The hegemony hit Altair 7, Altair 12, and the research station at Kepler 186, David replied, dropping his diplomatic persona. "Clean strikes, no witnesses, all data stolen. The Coalition is starting to panic." Patricia nodded, making notes on her own advanced tablet. "Our deep space monitoring stations picked up the Kethvar fleet movements 3 days ago. They're using some kind of stealth technology we haven't seen before, but our sensors can still track them." "Any changes to the timeline?" David asked. "Not yet. Phase 1 is proceeding exactly as planned. The Coalition thinks we're harmless, the hegemony ignores us completely, and our real preparations remain undetected." Patricia paused, studying data streams flowing across multiple screens. Dr. Wilson's team finished installing the quantum resonance detectors throughout the solar system. If anything enters our space, we'll know about it long before they detect us. David leaned back in his chair, considering the information. The other species are getting desperate. Admiral Zephyrus is pushing for a major military buildup, but they're still thinking in terms of conventional warfare. They have no idea what they're really facing. Let them learn the hard way, Patricia replied coldly. Every battle they lose gives us more data on hegemony capabilities. Our stealth reconnaissance drones are recording everything from energy signatures to tactical patterns. By the time they get around to considering Earth a threat, we'll know their weaknesses better than they do. The conversation was interrupted by an alert from Patricia's staff. A young technician approached her station with a concerned expression. General, we're detecting massive energy buildups in the Vega system. It looks like the hegemony is preparing for something big. Patricia's expression hardened. The Velmari homeworld. They're going after the Coalition's best defensive specialists. She turned back to David's image. This could be the beginning of the major offensive we've been expecting. I'll make sure to express appropriate concern at tomorrow's emergency session, David said. Maybe offer to send a few more outdated frigates to help with the evacuation. Perfect. Make sure Captain Stone gets those ships in position to observe the battle. We need to see how the hegemony handles fortified positions. Patricia began issuing orders to her staff even as she continued the conversation. And David, start laying the groundwork for humanity's eventual evacuation from the outer colonies. We'll need to make it look convincing when the time comes. After ending the communication, David returned to his diplomatic duties. He attended a reception hosted by the Nephtai ambassador, where he listened to worried conversations about hegemony expansion while maintaining his role as the concerned but helpless human representative. Other diplomats spoke around him rather than to him, treating Earth's presence as a polite formality. That night, David filed his official report to Earth, a document full of diplomatic language that would bore any Coalition intelligence analyst who might intercept it. The real information traveled through hidden channels, adding to humanity's growing database of alien psychology, technology, and tactical preferences. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on every human outpost and colony. Earth's citizens went about their daily lives under the watchful eyes of alien neighbors, appearing to struggle with basic technology while secretly operating the most advanced intelligence network in known space. They played their roles perfectly, maintaining the illusion of weakness that had become humanity's greatest strategic asset. The masquerade was complete, and the galaxy remained unaware that the species they dismissed as primitive was actually preparing for a war that hadn't officially begun yet. Emergency alarms screamed through the corridors of Centauri Station as news arrived from the Vega system. The impossible had happened. The Velmari, masters of defensive engineering who had never lost a single world in 300 years of conflicts, had fallen in less than 6 hours. Captain Lisa Stone received the news while her small fleet of human vessels conducted what appeared to be routine patrol exercises near the station. Her ship, the Explorer's Hope, looked like a modified cargo hauler from the outside, with visible rust stains and jury-rigged external components that suggested barely functional systems. The other Coalition captains often joked that human ships held together through luck and prayer. "Captain, we're receiving broadcast signals from Vega Prime," reported her communications officer, Tom Bradley. His console looked primitive compared to the sleek displays used by other species, but the hidden quantum processors beneath handled more data than most Coalition command ships. Lisa activated the main display, and the horror of the Velmari defeat became clear. The silicon-based species had built their cities inside massive mountain ranges, using their natural ability to shape stone and metal into impregnable fortresses. Their defensive barriers could withstand direct hits from antimatter warheads, and their underground tunnel networks made invasion nearly impossible. The hegemony had bypassed all of these advantages with a weapon no one had seen before: plasma storms that burned at temperatures hot enough to melt the Velmari mountain fortresses into rivers of liquid rock. The entire planet's surface had been transformed into a hellscape of flowing metal and superheated gas. "Estimated casualties?" Lisa asked quietly. "Total," Tom replied. "Population was 43 billion. No evacuation was possible due to the speed of the attack." Similar reports flooded in from across Coalition space. The aquatic Nephti had surrendered their 3 ocean worlds after watching their bioships dissolve under hegemony sonic attacks. The weapon somehow disrupted the neural networks that controlled their living vessels, turning their greatest strength into a vulnerability. The HFY, despite their advanced knowledge and careful planning, lost their primary research stations. When hegemony infiltrators activated hidden viruses in their computer networks, centuries of accumulated scientific data vanished in minutes, leaving the scholarly species in chaos. Each defeat followed the same pattern that made Coalition military analysts increasingly worried. The hegemony seemed to know exactly how to counter each species' greatest strengths. They didn't just defeat their enemies, they turned their advantages into weaknesses. Lisa found herself assigned to another rescue mission, along with the remnants of the Coalition fleet. Admiral Zephyrus had assembled every available ship for a desperate attempt to save the Altarian colonies in the Proxima sector. The plan was simple and doomed to failure. Arrive in force, establish a defensive perimeter, and evacuate as many civilians as possible before the hegemony arrived. The human contribution to this grand fleet consisted of 5 aging frigates and 2 converted cargo ships. Other captains barely acknowledged Lisa's presence at the tactical briefings, treating the human vessels as mobile medical stations rather than combat units. "Humans will focus on evacuation support," Admiral Zephyrus announced during the final mission briefing. "Your ships lack the firepower for direct engagement, but your cargo capacity might prove useful for refugee transport." Lisa accepted the assignment with apparent gratitude, even though her ships carried weapon systems that could destroy the Admiral's flagship in seconds. The key was making sure no one suspected that capability existed. The fleet jumped to hyperspace in formation, but Lisa's ships took slightly different routes. To outside observers, this looked like more human incompetence, their navigation computers unable to maintain proper formation. In reality, her vessels were deploying advanced reconnaissance drones throughout the region, mapping hegemony movements and analyzing their attack patterns. The battle for Proxima 3 lasted 14 minutes. The hegemony fleet appeared without warning, their stealth systems making them invisible until they opened fire. Their weapons had evolved again, now capable of adapting to enemy defenses in real time. Coalition plasma barriers that had worked against previous attacks were useless against modified energy beams that shifted frequency to penetrate any shield. Lisa watched from the Explorer's Hope as massive Coalition battleships exploded around her. The Torvak dreadnought Fury of Honor, pride of their fleet, lasted less than 3 minutes against weapons that seemed designed specifically to counter Torvak defensive systems. "Captain, Admiral Zephyrus is ordering all ships to retreat," Tom reported. "Coalition forces are taking 90% casualties." "Follow retreat protocols," Lisa ordered. "Make sure our damage looks convincing." Her crew activated pre-planted explosive charges that created spectacular but harmless fireworks across the ship's hull. To any observer, the Explorer's Hope appeared to be barely holding together as it limped away from the battle zone with the other survivors. But even as her ship played damaged, its hidden sensors recorded everything. Every energy signature from hegemony weapons, every tactical maneuver, every communication frequency they used. The data flowed through quantum-encrypted channels back to Luna Command, where human scientists studied their enemies' capabilities, with growing understanding. After the retreat, Lisa found herself in the Coalition's temporary headquarters on Torquan, the fortress world that now served as their last major stronghold. The mood was grim as casualty reports continued to arrive. In less than 2 months, the hegemony had destroyed or captured over 60 coalition worlds. "They're not just winning," observed Counselor Merith during an emergency strategy session. "They're winning too easily. Every battle feels like they knew exactly what we would do before we did it." Admiral Zephyrus slammed his fist on the tactical display. "Impossible. Our communication networks are secure. Our battle plans are classified at the highest levels." "Perhaps," suggested Ambassador David Ross in his mild diplomatic tone, "the hegemony has been studying coalition tactics for longer than we realized. Humanity has always believed that knowledge is the greatest weapon." The comment was dismissed by most attendees as another example of human philosophical thinking, having little relevance to military reality. They had no idea that David was providing them with the truth while maintaining his cover. Later, in her private quarters, Lisa established contact with Luna Command. General Hayes appeared on her screen, surrounded by displays showing the full scope of hegemony expansion across the galaxy. "Report," the general ordered. "The pattern is confirmed," Lisa replied. "They have specific countermeasures for every coalition species. Plasma storms for the Velmari, sonic disruptors for the Neftai, cyber warfare against the Akhai. It's not just superior technology. They've been preparing for this war for decades." "Any sign they consider humanity a threat?" Lisa shook her head. "During the battle, 3 hegemony ships passed within weapons range of my position. They didn't even bother to scan us properly. We're completely beneath their notice." "Perfect." General Hayes made notes on her tablet. "Phase 2 is approved. Begin withdrawing our visible assets from the outer colonies. Make it look like panic and incompetence. What about the coalition? Let them make their last stand. Every battle they fight gives us more intelligence on hegemony capabilities. By the time they fall, we'll know our enemies better than they know themselves." The following weeks saw humanity begin its apparent exodus from frontier territories. Human colonies broadcast distress signals and abandoned their positions in what looked like chaotic retreat. Other coalition species barely noticed, too focused on their own desperate situations to pay attention to human activities. But for every visible human asset that withdrew, 10 hidden installations went deeper underground. Stealth platforms positioned throughout human space activated advanced camouflage systems. Deep space monitoring stations extended their sensor networks. And on Luna, Dr. Wilson's research teams worked around the clock developing weapons designed specifically to counter hegemony technology. The dominoes continued to fall across the galaxy, but each falling piece provided humanity with more information, more time, and more reason to ensure their hidden preparations would be enough when the final confrontation began. The final Coalition War Council met in the deepest bunkers of Torquan, buried kilometers beneath the planet's surface. Around the massive strategic table sat the last free leaders of a dozen species, their faces showing the strain of months of continuous defeat. The holographic displays showed the grim reality. Hegemony forces now controlled over 80% of coalition space. Commander Alex Kim sat at the far end of the table, representing humanity's minimal presence at this desperate gathering. His uniform looked worn and his equipment outdated compared to the advanced gear carried by other military officers. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had watched his species' colonies fall one by one. "Earth's outer settlements have gone dark," he reported with apparent sadness. "Our communication arrays can't reach beyond the inner system anymore. We think the hegemony is jamming everything." In truth, those settlements had activated Protocol Exodus weeks ago. Every visible human presence had been carefully withdrawn while hidden installations went into deep stealth mode. The communication failures were actually humanity switching to quantum-encrypted channels that the hegemony couldn't detect. Admiral Zephyrus looked up from studying casualty reports. "How many human worlds have you lost?" 17 colonies. "Have stopped responding," Alex replied. "Maybe 20,000 people total. assuming they were evacuated in time. The numbers drew sympathetic looks from other officers. To species that had lost billions, humanity's casualties seemed almost insignificant. They had no way of knowing that those lost colonies were actually underground command centers coordinating the largest intelligence operation in galactic history. The hegemony's final offensive begins within days, announced Counselor Merith, her voice hollow with exhaustion. Our long-range sensors show massive fleet buildups at staging areas throughout their territory. They're preparing to hit all remaining coalition strongholds simultaneously. The tactical analysis made for grim reading. The Kethvar had deployed new weapons that defied conventional physics, temporal displacement fields that aged enemy ships into scrap metal during battle, reality distortion generators that made coalition, targeting systems completely useless, adaptive armor that evolved in real time to counter any weapon fired at it. Every species has the same story, observed General Vextar of the Altarian survivors. Our greatest strengths become our greatest weaknesses. Our plasma weapons feed their adaptive shields. Our defensive barriers become conductors for their energy attacks. It's as if they designed their entire military specifically to counter everything we're capable of. Alex nodded with apparent understanding, though he knew exactly why the hegemony was so effective. Humanity had been feeding them information for months through carefully orchestrated defeats and intelligence leaks. Every coalition battle, plan, every defensive innovation, every tactical doctrine had been subtly revealed to the enemy through human incompetence and captured databases. "We have one chance," Admiral Zephyrus declared, his red skin glowing with desperate determination. "The Nexus Gates. If we can hold that system, we can control access to the core worlds, force them into a single massive battle where our remaining fleets can concentrate their firepower." The plan was tactically sound and strategically hopeless. The Nexus Gates controlled the primary hyperspace routes to the heart of Coalition space, but holding them required coordination and equipment that the Shattered Alliance no longer possessed. Everyone at the table knew they were planning their final stand. "Humanity will contribute everything we have left," Alex announced. 3 frigates and a converted cargo ship. It's not much, but we'll fight to the end." His offer was met with grateful but pitying expressions. Other commanders began discussing the deployment of their few remaining dreadnoughts and battle stations, while Alex's tiny contribution was barely noted in the tactical planning. The Battle of Nexus Gates began 3 days later. Alex positioned his small human squadron at the edge of the formation, where they would be safe from the primary engagement. His ships looked pathetic compared to the massive coalition vessels around them, but hidden beneath their crude armor plating were sensor arrays more advanced than anything the enemy possessed. The hegemony arrived in a fleet that blotted out the stars. Hundreds of Kethvar warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their organic-looking hulls gleaming with predatory menace. At their center flew the command vessel of Supreme War Leader Krelvex, a massive ship that pulsed with barely contained energy. "Coalition fleet, you face the inevitable," came the transmission from the hegemony flagship. "Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Continue this futile resistance, and we will make your species suffer for generations." Admiral Zephyrus responded with typical Torvak defiance. "Come and take what you can, lizards. We'll show you how free species die." The battle was a masterpiece of military coordination from the hegemony's perspective. Their adaptive weapons shifted and evolved in real time, countering every coalition tactic within minutes of its deployment. Torvak plasma cannons became useless as enemy shields learned to absorb their energy. Akai quantum torpedoes were redirected back at their own ships by modified temporal fields. Alex watched from the bridge of his flagship, Endeavor, as coalition forces died around him. The dreadnought Eternal Vigilance exploded in a cascade of light as its own weapons were turned against it. The battle station Fortress Prime, designed to be impregnable, collapsed when hegemony reality distortion fields caused its internal structure to phase out of normal space-time. Sir, Admiral Zephyrus is ordering all ships to maintain formation, reported his communications officer, Helen Cross. He wants us to stay in defensive positions. Acknowledged, Alex replied, though he knew the order was meaningless. The coalition formation was already collapsing under the hegemony's relentless assault. Continue recording everything. Make sure all data reaches Luna Command. The end came faster than anyone expected. Within 2 hours, the coalition fleet was reduced to scattered survivors fleeing in all directions. Admiral Zephyrus made his final stand aboard his flagship, using his ship's self-destruct system to take 3 hegemony vessels with him. Alex received orders to retreat along with the other surviving ships, but his vessels were too damaged to maintain formation. The human squadron limped away from the battle zone, appearing barely functional while their hidden systems recorded every detail of the hegemony's victory. The formal surrender ceremony took place on Centauri Station, now under Kethvar control. Representatives of the surviving coalition species signed documents acknowledging hegemony supremacy and accepting vassal status. The alternative was total extinction, and everyone understood that the Kethvar were capable of following through. On that threat, Ambassador David Ross signed on behalf of humanity, his hands apparently shaking with fear. The Kethvar governor barely glanced at the human representative, considering Earth too insignificant to warrant attention. Other species received detailed occupation protocols and resource extraction quotas, while humanity was simply told to continue their primitive existence under new management. Your species is fortunate, Governor Veltros informed the assembled diplomats. You are too backward to threaten our rule and too primitive to resist effectively. You will be allowed to maintain your simple lives as long as you obey hegemony. Authority. David nodded with apparent gratitude, though internally he was calculating the final phase of humanity's preparations. Every Kethvar ship, every weapon system, every command protocol had been catalogued during months of careful observation. The occupation forces had no idea they were being studied by the very species they dismissed as harmless. The coalition was dead, its member species scattered across the galaxy as slaves and refugees. The great alliance that had once spanned thousands of worlds now existed only in hidden bases and memorial databases. But in the darkness between the stars, humanity's true fleet waited in perfect silence. The last ally had fallen silent, but Earth's silence was different. It was the quiet of a predator that had finished stalking its prey and was now ready to strike. The hegemony had won the war, but they had never realized they were fighting the wrong enemy. Phase 3 was about to begin, and the galaxy would learn what happened when the most patient species in known space finally stopped pretending to be weak. Governor Veltros reviewed the monthly compliance reports from the Sol system with satisfaction. 3 months had passed since the hegemony's complete victory, and the human territories were proving to be model examples of peaceful occupation. Unlike the troublesome Torvac survivors who continued staging pointless raids, or the Akhai who kept trying to hide scientific data, the humans simply accepted their new reality with remarkable grace. Earth's resource shipments arrived on schedule every week. Mining operations on Mars and the asteroid belt produced exactly the quotas demanded without complaint. The human colonists went about their simple lives of agriculture and basic manufacturing, showing no signs of organized resistance or hidden technological capabilities. These humans are almost refreshingly primitive, Veltros commented to his aide Commander Yexhai as they studied the latest reports. No advanced weapons to confiscate, no military academies to shut down, no research facilities developing dangerous technologies. They're exactly what they appeared to be during the war. The Kethvar had initially been puzzled by humanity's rapid collapse. Most species fought desperately even after formal surrender, requiring years of brutal suppression to achieve complete control. But humans had simply stopped fighting the moment their government signed the surrender documents. Their colonies went quiet, Their ships returned to port, and their people resumed civilian activities as if nothing had changed. What the occupiers didn't realize was that every compliance report, every resource shipment, and every routine communication was being carefully monitored by Dr. Susan Parker from her apparently harmless agricultural research station on Titan. The facility looked like a typical human attempt at food production efficiency, complete with outdated equipment and poorly maintained buildings that suggested barely functional technology. Behind the facade of crop analysis and soil testing, Susan coordinated the largest intelligence operation in galactic history. Her team had spent months cataloging every hegemony asset in human space, mapping their patrol routes, identifying their communication frequencies, and studying their command structures with microscopic detail. "Pattern analysis is complete," reported Dr. James Wilson from his hidden laboratory beneath the lunar surface. His team had been working around the clock to decode the secrets of hegemony technology, using data gathered during months of careful observation. Their adaptive systems have a critical vulnerability. Susan activated her secure connection to Luna Command, where General Hayes monitored the progress of Phase 3 preparations. The conversation took place through quantum-encrypted channels that made their communication invisible to hegemony detection equipment. The breakthrough came when we realized how their adaptation technology actually works, James explained, his excitement barely contained despite the serious circumstances. Their weapons and shields learn by analyzing incoming attacks and developing countermeasures in real time, but they can only adapt to threats they've encountered before. General Hayes leaned forward, studying the technical data flowing across her displays. Which means they've spent decades preparing to fight coalition technology, but they've never seen anything like our hidden weapons. Exactly. Their adaptive fields are programmed to counter plasma weapons, quantum torpedoes, energy barriers, and temporal displacement systems. But they have no baseline data for human technology because we never used our real weapons during the war. The implications were staggering. The hegemony had achieved their overwhelming victories by turning their enemy's greatest strengths into weaknesses. Torvac plasma cannons were redirected back at their own ships. Velmari defensive barriers became conductors for enemy energy attacks. Nephti bioships were dissolved by weapons designed specifically to target their living tissue, but humanity had never revealed their true capabilities. Every battle they fought used deliberately primitive weapons that posed no real threat to hegemony forces. Their actual military technology remained completely unknown to enemy analysts. "How long until we're ready?" Hayes asked. "All hidden installations are fully operational," Susan reported from Titan. "Stealth destroyer squadrons are positioned throughout the solar system and beyond. Orbital defense platforms have been online for weeks. Dr. Martinez's team finished installing the quantum interference generators last Tuesday." James added his own assessment. "Weapon systems are ready for deployment. The phase shift cannons can punch through any known armor type. The chronostatic anchors will prevent their temporal displacement attacks, and the quantum viruses are prepared to infiltrate their communication networks the moment we activate them." But the most important preparation was psychological. For over a year, humanity had presented themselves as helpless victims who accepted defeat with resigned compliance. Hegemony forces had grown comfortable with their overwhelming superiority, confident that no remaining threat existed in the galaxy. Patrol schedules had become routine and predictable. Security protocols had relaxed as commanders focused on resource extraction rather than military vigilance. The Kethvar had begun treating human space as conquered territory rather than potential battleground. Governor Veltros had even reduced the military presence in the Sol system, reassigning several warships to more challenging occupation zones, where actual resistance continued. In his reports to High Command, he consistently described the human territories as completely pacified and requiring minimal supervision. The few remaining coalition resistance groups had noticed humanity's apparent collaboration with disturbing clarity. Hidden cells of Torvac survivors sent bitter messages accusing humans of betraying the Alliance for favorable treatment. Some HFY scholars suggested that humanity had always been hegemony agents, explaining their mysterious survival while other species faced extinction. These accusations suited humanity's purposes perfectly. The more other species viewed them as collaborators and cowards, the less likely anyone would suspect their true intentions. Even former allies now ignored human activities completely, focusing their limited resources on their own desperate struggles. Phase 3 activation in 72 hours, General Hayes announced to her assembled staff. All units maintain stealth protocols until the signal is given. Remember, we get one chance at complete surprise. After that, it becomes a war of preparation against adaptation. Across human space, the final preparations continued in absolute silence. Weapons that had been hidden for years received their final system checks. Stealth ships that had masqueraded as cargo haulers for months moved into attack positions. Deep space monitoring stations that appeared to be simple communication relays prepared to coordinate the largest military operation in human history. The hegemony had conquered the galaxy by understanding their enemies better than those enemies understood themselves. They had studied every coalition species for decades, learning their weaknesses and designing specific countermeasures for their greatest strengths. But they had made one critical error. They had dismissed humanity as too primitive to study seriously. While they spent years analyzing Torvac plasma technology and Velmari defensive systems, they never bothered to investigate what humans might be capable of when they stopped pretending to be weak. Governor Veltros filed his final weekly report, noting with satisfaction that human territories remained completely peaceful. He had no way of knowing that the silence he praised was actually the quiet of a carefully planned ambush that was about to shatter his understanding of galactic warfare. The humans had learned patience from 1,000 years of their own bloody history. They understood that sometimes the greatest victory required appearing to accept defeat, and they were about to demonstrate that the most dangerous enemy was the one you never saw coming. The first sign of trouble came when Hegemony Patrol Fleet 7 simply vanished between Mars and Jupiter. One moment, Commander Gexaval was transmitting routine status reports from his 3-ship squadron, and the next moment, all communication ceased. Governor Veltros initially dismissed the incident as equipment failure in the primitive human system, but when a search team found nothing except scattered debris, a cold unease began to settle in his mind. 3 days later, supply convoy. Theta failed to arrive at the Titan mining facility. The convoy's escort reported mechanical difficulties and requested assistance, but when backup forces reached the coordinates, they found only empty space and fading energy signatures that made no sense according to known physics. Perhaps the humans are more resourceful than we thought, suggested Commander Yexhai during the morning briefing. They might be salvaging our technology for primitive weapons. Veltros shook his head, studying the latest reports from across human territory. Impossible. Our sensors would detect any significant technology. These humans barely understand their own primitive systems, let alone our adaptive technology. But the incidents continued with increasing frequency. Patrol ships reported strange sensor readings before losing contact. Communication relays experienced mysterious failures that seemed to spread through the network like a virus. Most disturbing of all, the failures followed no pattern that hegemony analysts could understand or predict. The truth revealed itself at exactly 800 hours, Galactic Standard Time, when General Hayes gave the activation order from Luna Command. Across the solar system and beyond, humanity's hidden network came online simultaneously in the largest coordinated military operation in their species' history. Stealth destroyers that had masqueraded as space debris for months suddenly appeared, around every hegemony position. The ships looked unlike anything in known space, their hulls rippling with energy fields that seemed to bend light and reality around them. Weapons emerged from concealed bays, pointing with deadly precision at targets that had no idea they were. Already surrounded, Admiral Lisa Stone commanded the assault from her flagship, no longer disguised as the primitive explorer's hope. The vessel's true form was a masterpiece of human engineering, bristling with weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Around her, the hidden fleet of Earth's Navy deployed for battle, revealing ships that made hegemony technology look crude by comparison. "All units, commence Operation Revelation," Lisa transmitted across secure channels. "Remember, we have studied them for over a year. They know nothing about us. Make every shot count." The first attacks came without warning. Phase-shift cannons that fired through dimensions struck hegemony ships from impossible angles. The adaptive shields that had made them invincible against coalition weapons simply could not process attacks that existed partially outside normal space-time. Governor Veltros felt his command ship shudder under impacts that should have been impossible. "Report!" he demanded, his voice cracking with disbelief. "Unknown weapons, sir. Our adaptive systems can't analyze the energy signatures. The attacks seem to be coming from multiple dimensions at once." On the main display, hegemony ships exploded in cascades of light as human weapons tore through their defenses. The temporal displacement fields that had aged coalition vessels into scrap metal were useless against ships equipped with chronostatic anchors that locked them firmly in present time. "Impossible," Veltros whispered, watching his fleet die around him. "These are humans. They can barely manage interstellar travel." His communications officer looked up from her console with terror in her reptilian features. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission. It's coming from everywhere at once." Admiral Hayes appeared on every screen throughout hegemony space, her image transmitted simultaneously from hidden relay stations positioned across the galaxy. Behind her, the Luna Command Center hummed with activity as humanity's true technological capabilities became visible for the first time. Governor Veltros, Commander Gex Val, and all hegemony forces currently occupying human territory, she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had planned this moment for years. "You are surrounded by the human fleet. Your adaptive technology is useless against weapons you have never encountered. I am offering you one chance to surrender." The response came in the form of desperate counterattacks, as hegemony commanders refused to believe what they were seeing. Their most advanced warships opened fire with everything they possessed, adaptive weapons shifting and evolving in real time to counter the human threat. But the countermeasures were based on technology the humans had never actually used. Every scan, every analysis, every tactical assessment the hegemony had made during the war was based on deliberately primitive weapons and fake technical specifications. Their adaptive systems tried to counter plasma cannons while being destroyed by quantum phase disruptors. "Sir, our temporal displacement generators are offline," reported Veltros's tactical officer. "The humans have some kind of chronostatic field that prevents temporal manipulation." "And our reality distortion weapons?" "Useless, sir. Their ships exist in multiple dimensional phases simultaneously. We can't target something that's only partially in our reality." The battle for the Sol system lasted 6 hours and ended with the complete destruction or surrender of every hegemony vessel. But the real shock came when similar reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Human fleets were emerging from hiding places that shouldn't have existed, attacking hegemony forces with coordinated precision that suggested months of preparation. Dr. Wilson's quantum viruses had infiltrated hegemony communication networks, turning their own coordination systems against them. Weapons that had never been fired in anger proved devastatingly effective against enemies who had no defense against unknown technology. On Centauri Station, Ambassador David Ross dropped his diplomatic facade as human Marines secured the facility. The same man who had played the helpless representative for years now moved with military precision, coordinating the liberation of coalition survivors and the capture of hegemony command personnel. "How?" demanded Supreme War Leader Krelvex, as human forces surrounded his flagship. "We studied your species for decades. You showed no advanced technology, no military capability, no threat to our expansion." David's response was broadcast across all frequencies, ensuring that every surviving member of every species would hear humanity's explanation. "You studied what we wanted you to study. Every battle we fought, every defeat we suffered, every piece of technology you captured was carefully designed to make you underestimate us." The truth was staggering in its implications. Humanity had allowed the coalition to fall, their allies to die, and entire civilizations to suffer conquest, all to maintain the illusion of weakness while preparing for this moment. Every patrol that disappeared was studying your technology. Every supply convoy that failed was planting monitoring devices. Every human colony that went dark was actually a hidden military base. We let you think you had won while we learned everything about you. As hegemony resistance collapsed across the galaxy, human ships began the systematic liberation of occupied worlds. But they moved with careful restraint, using precise strikes to neutralize military targets while avoiding civilian casualties. This was not a war of conquest, but a war of liberation. The rescued coalition species reacted with a mixture of gratitude and horror as they learned the truth about humanity's deception. They had been saved by allies who had watched them suffer for over a year while maintaining perfect cover for their preparations. "Why?" asked Admiral Zephyrus, miraculously alive after his flagship's destruction thanks to human rescue teams. "Why let so many die when you could have ended this war months ago?" General Hayes met with the surviving coalition leaders on the liberated Centauri station, her expression showing the weight of the decisions she had made. Because rushing into battle would have meant fighting their superior technology with inferior knowledge. We needed to understand everything about them before we revealed anything about ourselves. The explanation was logical but painful. Humanity had sacrificed the moral high ground to achieve strategic certainty. They had let the galaxy burn while they prepared the tools to extinguish the fire completely. As the last hegemony strongholds fell, the reformed coalition began the long process of rebuilding. But the galaxy would never again underestimate the species that had turned apparent weakness into ultimate strength. Earth had acted powerless until the moment came to demonstrate that the greatest power sometimes lay in being underestimated. The war was over, but the legend of humanity's patient cunning would endure for generations. A reminder that in the vast darkness of space, the most dangerous enemies were often the ones you never saw coming.